welcome to this explainer. Okay, let's jump right into what is honestly a fascinating dual approach to understanding truth and reality. For thousands of years, human beings have been on this relentless quest to figure out what is actually real, how the universe works, and exactly where we fit into the whole shebang. But to get a complete picture, we've actually had to look in two completely different directions. One direction looks outward, at the massive scale of the cosmos, while the other looks inward, deep into the very nature of consciousness itself. So today, we're going to explore how these two seemingly opposite paths are, in fact, two sides of the exact same coin. Here is our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to cover the subject-object split, mapping the object, mapping the knower, contrasting maps, the limits of each, and finally, we'll wrap up with an integrative inquiry. All right, Section 1, the subject-object split, the foundation of experience. To get started, we have to ground ourselves at the very baseline of everyday human life. Before we can even begin to map reality, we have to ask a super fundamental question to anchor our entire philosophical journey today. When you wake up in the morning, open your eyes, and interact with the world around you, what is actually happening? To understand the universe, we first have to understand the basic mechanics of how we experience anything at all. Think about literally every single ordinary experience. You always have a knower, and you always have a known. If you're looking at a tree, hearing a sound, remembering something from yesterday, or even just thinking a random thought, that tree, sound, or thought becomes the object of your experience. Meanwhile, the consciousness that is doing the experiencing, well, that's you, and you occupy the position of the subject. Now, this distinction happens so naturally and so seamlessly that we almost never pause to question it. But recognizing this split, it's absolutely crucial for everything we are about to cover. Moving on to Section 2, Science, Mapping the Object. Let's take a look at how humanity has historically tackled the known half of this equation.
Science systematically directs our attention outward. It takes the phenomena we experience and attempts to transform them into objects of systematic, measurable investigation. And to do this effectively, science requires something to be observed from a third-person perspective. This basically means stripping away personal interpretation so that anyone else can independently verify the results. It is all about looking at the world out there.
Now, what's truly mind-blowing here is the sheer scale of the cosmos that science has successfully mapped through this outward observation. By relying on experimentation and mathematical reasoning, science has uncovered the visible and invisible structures of our world. We've mapped everything from the microscopic behavior of atoms and molecules to biological systems and the incredibly complex human brain, all the way up to the macroscopic expanse of stars and massive galaxies. It is an absolutely extraordinary map of the objective universe. But here's the catch, and it's a really crucial boundary to recognize. Methodological objectivity is for sure science's greatest strength, but it also creates a strict limit. Let's say a scientist is studying the brain. They can track behavior and map the exact physical correlates of consciousness. But think about a brain scan. It can show us the precise neural activity associated with pain. Sure, but that scan on the screen is not the actual pain itself, right? The external description and the first-person felt experience are related, but they definitely aren't identical. Science maps the physical conditions of an experience, but the subjective feeling of the experience itself remains a very distinct philosophical problem. All right, let's flip the mirror. Section 3, Contemplation, Mapping the Knower. Let's reverse our direction and explore the second track of our inquiry. Instead of getting caught up in the contents of experience, the contemplative tradition asks this profound foundational question. Rather than just continuously chasing the endless stream of thoughts, sensations, and emotions that pop up and disappear in our minds, the contemplative pauses and asks, what is aware of all these changes? Attention shifts dramatically from the object being known straight back to the process and condition of knowing itself. Historically, Indian philosophical traditions systematically turned their attention inward. Instead of treating consciousness just like a lens to view the world, they actually made it the primary field of investigation. Through practices like meditation and intense self-inquiry, they developed some highly sophisticated methods for examining experience. The Upanishadic traditions explored the deep relationship between the self, the Atman, and ultimate reality. Advaita Vedanta investigated that profound distinction between our chaotic everyday experiences and the steady underlying awareness that they all appear in. Meanwhile, Buddhist traditions rigorously examined the apparent self, arriving at these fascinating insights of non-self and emptiness. Now, it's important to note these traditions don't all reach the exact same conclusions, but they aren't just rigid dogmas. They're a rich family of philosophical experiments into the very nature of awareness and selfhood. Which brings us to Section 4, Contrasting Maps of Reality. Let's put these two methodologies side by side. When you look at these maps side by side, you see this amazing dichotomy between expanding our understanding of the cosmos and deepening our understanding of consciousness. Just look at the contrast in the types of questions they ask. Science moves from the world toward knowledge of the world, asking things like, what is matter? Or how does the brain operate? It wants to figure out the laws governing the universe. Contemplation, on the other hand, moves from experience toward knowledge of the experiencer. It asks, what is awareness and who is the experiencer? Neither direction is better than the other. They are just exploring entirely different dimensions of reality. And that naturally leads into Section 5, the limits of each direction, the boundaries of inquiry. Here is the absolute golden rule. Never confuse their domains. Each approach hits a hard limit. Science can explain increasingly massive dimensions of the universe, like how stars form or how evolution works, but all that physical description doesn't automatically tell us what human beings ought to value or what the ultimate meaning of life is. On the flip side, contemplation can beautifully illuminate the structures of suffering, identity, and awareness, but an insight into consciousness is not going to help you build a spaceship. Contemplative insight just isn't a substitute for empirical investigation of the physical world. The danger is always when we try using a physical theory to settle a metaphysical question about meaning, or try using a spiritual insight to establish a theory in physics. So how do we fix that? Section 6. Toward an integrated inquiry. We've finally arrived at the climax of our explainer, bringing these two tracks together. Recognizing objective, subjective, and intersubjective perspectives creates a truly comprehensive framework of reality. You see, the relationship between science and spirituality doesn't have to be a battle. Mature contemplative practices offer really disciplined, stable, first-person knowledge about our own inner experience. Science offers rigorous, publicly measurable third-person knowledge. And bridging those two is second-person knowledge, the domain of human dialogue, teaching, and relationship. A complete architecture of human understanding literally requires all three of these perspectives working together in harmony. So as we integrate all these ideas, remember the big picture. Science asks us to look carefully outward at what is there. It investigates the universe, providing an incredibly detailed map of the known. While contemplation is just as powerful, but it asks us to look carefully inward at how there is an experience of what is there. It maps consciousness not as just another object, but as the very field in which the entire cosmos is experienced. It investigates the structures of knowing. But at the deepest level, bringing these together creates a really challenging philosophical paradox. If everything we know appears within consciousness, then investigating the known eventually raises some big questions about the knower. And if the knower attempts to turn around and understand itself, well, it realizes it can't easily become just another ordinary object of knowledge. So I'm going to leave you with this final, profound cliffhanger to ponder long after this explainer ends. Can the knower completely know itself in the same way that it knows an object? Maybe true wisdom simply begins when we learn to look in both directions, inward and outward, without ever confusing the two. Thanks so much for exploring this with me today, and keep asking the big questions.